We're pleased to welcome you to the AUSA Noon Report, a new virtual series featuring senior Army leaders that provide important updates on key defense topics. Kicking off today's event is the President and Chief Executive Officer of the Association of the United States Army, General Carter Ham.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Association of the United States Army's Noon Report. Frankly, we wish we could all be together at AUSA for this kind of an event, but that's just not possible these days. So we've crafted a series of events to bring you senior defense leaders speaking on topics of current interest in a live interactive forum. We're really glad that you've joined us today and we appreciate your support. I'd like to especially thank our sponsor for today's Noon Report, Leonardo DRS. Leonardo DRS has been an AUSA national partner since 1986 and has long provided essential capabilities to America's Army. We cannot thank you enough for your support over the years and for your sponsorship today. Thanks. I'd also, before we get started, like to acknowledge a retirement ceremony that occurred just a few hours ago. Lieutenant General Chip Luckey, Chief of the Army Reserve and Commander of U.S. Army Reserve Command, culminated his military career today, and all of us at AUSA and across the Army wish General Luckey and his wife Julie all of the success into the future. Our guest for today's Noon Report is General Paul Funk, who has served as the Commanding General of the United States Army Training and Doctrine Command since July of last year. He was born at Fort Hood into an Army family. General Funk graduated from Fort Knox High School. He holds a bachelor's degree from Montana State University, a master's degree from Central Michigan University, and completed a fellowship at the Institute of Advanced Technology at the University of Texas in Austin. As CG of Tradoc, General Funk is responsible for 32 Army schools organized under 10 centers of excellence that recruit, train, and educate more than 500,000 soldiers and service members from the other services each year. 500,000. That's a big number. General Funk's combat and operational experience includes 6 deployments in support of Operations Desert Shield and Desert Storm, Operation Iraqi Freedom, Operation Enduring Freedom, and Operation Inherent Resolve. And on top of all of that, he commanded the 1st Infantry Division, the Big Red One. If you have any questions for General Funk today, please use the Q&A tab on the lower right-hand side of your screen. General Funk and I will have a conversation for a few minutes, then we'll turn to as many of your questions as time will allow. I did notice as our audience was building that one of your predecessors, General Scott Wallace, is registered to attend, as is General Lou Wagner, former commander of Army Materiel Command and a senior fellow here at AUSA. And just to put a little bit of added pressure, your father's on.
Oh, awesome.
Lieutenant General retired Butch Funk. We welcome all of you and would ask all of you please to welcome our guest today, General Paul Funk, Commander Tradoc. General Funk, welcome. We're glad to have you today.
Thanks for having me today. I really do appreciate it. It's a tough day when one of your heroes starts to interview you, but I really appreciate it. So thanks for having me today.
We're really happy to have you today. You know, Training and Doctrine Command has changed. I guess one could say this is not your father's Tradoc these days.
Nope.
Over the past year under your watch, Tradoc really has changed a lot. You know, the Army Capabilities Integration Center, ARCIC, is known to many, you know, has now transferred to Army Futures Command as the Futures and Concepts Directorate. So that's one of the many changes. Could you talk with us a little bit about how Tradoc has changed and what's your vision for the command?
Well, you highlighted the biggest change, but we're focused on lethality and leader development now as a purpose throughout of our centers of excellence. And the real big issue in today's force is the accessions piece. We've developed the Army People Strategy, and through that we're implementing how we change everything from how we recruit people differently to how we do ROTC. You name it, we're trying to get after the people business in a very, very structured and compounded way.
The Army looks to you and to your command to recruit officers and enlisted members. and with the chief's emphasis on people,
Yeah.
that's pretty important.
Yes, it is.
And so we'll have some discussion about
Yep.
that. I'm sure we'll have lots of audience questions. But in the current circumstance with the COVID-19 pandemic, how has that affected recruiting? And how has that affected your training mission for officers and enlisted?
Well, first of all, let me emphasize one thing. Tradoc has never closed. We've been training the force since this COVID environment came upon us. We saw it as a condition on the battlefield, very serious condition. Our leaders are trained to assess risk, develop mitigation strategies, and then implement the training. They've done that in stride. We paused for about 2 weeks to set our medical capability, to thicken it at our Army training centers. And then what we did was we found a way to make this happen. What we've been able to develop was a strategy called 2+8, where we bring people in for the first 2 weeks, the first 14 days of what we call controlled monitoring. And that allows us not to do some of the more physical things, but it allows us to get after the Army values, to get after what it means to serve in the Army, to get after some of the diversity classes and procedures and processes that we need to get after. It allows us to have this conversation right now about race, because we've had this in a control group with their drill sergeants right there with them. And what we found is it is increasing our graduation rates from basic training. It is decreasing our incidents of indiscipline, and it really has fundamentally changed how a young man or woman comes into the Army.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating to have watched this from the outside, with all the concerns about COVID-19. And so could you talk a little bit more about how do you protect that young woman or young man who first enlists from the time, before they ship to initial military training and until they complete their training and go to an operational assignment?
Well, the greatest piece, and if you got to see that force of nature that is Frank Muth last couple of weeks ago, what he was talking about, we immediately went into the digital realm with our recruiters. And what that allowed us to do is protect the force early on so that we could make great decisions on how we were going to address the COVID across the disease across the country, and how we were going to be able to protect our recruiters, let them come out and get into the digital space, attract the talent that we're looking for, and then take those folks that are really focused on wanting to serve, and then almost do individual service for them. It has been remarkably professional by our recruiters. They've done an amazing job in the digital space.
So staying on the recruiting theme, today is day one of National Hiring Days for the United States Army. Tell us a little bit about why did you do that? What is it, and what do you expect to achieve? And importantly, what can we as veterans, as soldiers for life, what can we do to help that effort?
Awesome, great question. And because of National Hiring Day, what the idea behind it was, get people excited about service to their nation, to wear the cloth of their great nation and be part of something bigger than themselves, be part of the solution to this COVID problem, not part of the problem. So how do we bring you in? For example, if you take one of our military occupational specialties, 68 Whiskey, which is one of our great medics, combat medics, those folks are on the front lines right now. And so we want people to be excited about service to their nation there. We think that we saw that early on, if we were going to be able to do this, to recruit 10,000 people, it was going to take the Army to do that. And the actual output has been remarkable. From our retiree, our soldier for life population, to all of our combat units, to all of our combat service and service support units, to those drill sergeants, everybody has kind of stood up and said, this is my squad, and if you want to be part of it, come be part of something bigger than yourself.
We've heard those words from the Sergeant Major of the
right.
Army, with whom I know you have
I do.
a long-standing relationship, and it really is important. So I've got one more question for General Funk, and then we'll turn to your questions. And again, if you've got a question, please go to the Q&A tab on the right-hand side of your screen and enter that question there. General Funk, you touched on the issue of race and diversity and inclusion. So can you talk a little bit about how that emphasis has affected the Tradoc's mission, and particularly on leaders? What is it? What have you done to help leaders? And we heard yesterday from the chief about project inclusion.
Yes.
If you could talk a little bit about what that is, please.
So in project inclusion, what the secretary and the chief have brought in is we're going to take the photos out of our board processes. We're going to look at our military justice system and decide and look at what's going on in that and do some history pieces of that. And then what we're going to do is have this very, very serious conversation about our profession and about what it means to serve in the Army, and about what it means to be a person of color in our Army, what it means gender-wise, et cetera. And it's at the individual level. This is my squad. These are our leaders. And what we should see from our leadership is talking to the young troopers and them responding to, okay, I now understand what it is we're trying to get done. We want to have an open dialogue and an open conversation. And it's best done at the junior level, where that sergeant can say, hey, that's not acceptable in my squad. This is how we treat people. We treat people with dignity and respect. We look at this as the last great meritocracy of the world, which is our great Army.
So I'm going to follow up on that and belie my previous statement. That was my last question. I'd like to follow up on the enlisted force of the Army is pretty diverse.
Yes.
It broadly represents the nation that the Army serves. The officer corps has challenges in that regard, particularly amongst the more senior ranks, the general officer ranks. What do you see are things that could be done in the relative near term to try to make the officer ranks, the senior officer ranks, more inclusive?
Well, first of all, we've got to recognize the diverse talent that we have and put people in the proper positions so that they can succeed. It's not about handing something out. It's about taking and seizing an opportunity and driving towards a solution. From the Army ROTC, for example, General John Evans has taken now a process where he's developed two sets, and he calls it the urban, I can't remember the name right now, but he calls it the Urban Recruiting Office and for diversity. And he's after demographics in Houston and in Los Angeles. And what he's trying to do is find great young talent that wants to come in and be part of the officer corps. It's going to take time to build in the officer corps because everyone is competing for our great talent. So what does that mean? That means we have to compete for the talent that we have now and then build upon that piece. So we got to find the right ways to change the officer promotion system and the officer assignment process. And we're doing that now. We've got the Talent Management Task Force that has done remarkable work in looking at diversity and how we're going to start changing assignment preferences, et cetera, to look for more opportunity for everyone, really.
Yeah, I think what I've seen you talk about and others, the chief and others, there is no magic solution. There is no one, push this button and everything gets fixed in the Army. But it will take comprehensive effort, and like everything else in the Army, what matters most is leadership, and all of us appreciate your leadership. So turning now to questions from the audience, again, use that Q&A tab on the right-hand side. And so one that's near and dear to the heart of all soldiers, the Army Combat Fitness Test.
Yes.
All right. So what's the plan? What's the implementation plan? I read something yesterday that now Congress wants to get involved in the timing and the implementation of the Army Combat Fitness Test. What's going on? Well,
we're actually attacking the Army Combat Fitness Test multiple ways. First of all, we must change the culture of fitness in our Army. We have to. We got to change it in the nation. We have a problem. Only 1 in 10, roughly, kids can serve. Actually, it's a little more than that. It's about 29% can even serve. The biggest portion of why they can't serve happens to be obesity in our nation. So we have to take that on. The Army's always driven those kinds of change, social change. And so the Army Combat Fitness Test is a first step in the holistic health and fitness program where we attack our fitness, we attack our sleep, we talk about nutrition, we look for ways to recover from minor injuries, and then we look at reclassification for those folks that are hurt that can't perform in the current MOS but can move to another one and still be part of the process. So it's a holistic approach to this process. The Army Combat Fitness Test is about core strength. It's about changing a process. I came into the Army, when I came in, was the last year of the 5-event PT test, which was 1981, I think. And then we all changed. Yeah, that was a 5-event test. We all changed to the current test we have now, the push-ups, sit-ups, and the 2-mile run. And we did that for 40 years. Well, if you think about the way the nation has changed in terms of its fitness, its approach to nutrition science, all those things, it is only logical that we should change with it. So the Army Combat Fitness Test is that approach. It's chest strength. It's all related to actual things you'll have to do on the battlefield. There are no front lines anymore. It's a 360-degree battlefield. That way, that means that everybody has to be able to carry heavy load. You have to evacuate your buddy off the battlefield. That is near and dear to our heart. So you've got to understand that piece of it. I think the physical, we're putting occupational therapists, nutritionists, physical therapists, professional strength coaches, all those kinds of people into this program so that when the soldier, we're going to make warrior athletes, because to compete in the modern or the multi-domain operational battlefield in the future, you're going to have to be able to be incredibly fit in order to sustain the rigor of that battlefield. So we're trying to make that approach and that change now. It'll start, we'll collect the data starting on 1 October, we'll collect all the data and we'll work our way through that until March of 22, and then we'll make some decisions. What we really need is people to get out and take the test, because then we'll have really informed physical data and science.
Yeah, so some of the preliminary data where in units where nutritionists, physical therapists, and others, rates of sick call have gone down, rates of non-deployability have gone significantly down. So this comprehensive approach that you're talking about, I think, certainly has had some positive effect. You mentioned in your conversation about recruiting and how recruiters have adapted to having to recruit virtually. And so we've got a number of questions about how is Tradoc leveraging all the information that's available? How are you analyzing that, assessing that to assist not just in recruiting, but more broadly across Tradoc's mission sets? How are you leveraging information technology and maybe even artificial intelligence?
Well, as we leverage our way through that piece, we are probably on the leading edge of artificial intelligence in terms of implementing the Army's people strategy. But the data we're starting to collect on attrition, why people get out, what causes, what injuries are the most common at our Army training centers, for example, have allowed us to really change our programs significantly. So we are now into the data science business much more than we ever were before. That's been a uniquely actually uplifting to be able to see the data and then make decisions based on what's truly happening instead of just gut instinct, which commanders do many times.
Yeah, absolutely. And so a follow-on question to that is in leveraging technology. And as we learn more about conducting events virtually, like recruiting, like this event, has that caused you to rethink professional military education, both NCO and officer? Are there technologies that you can leverage rather than bringing people together at Fort Benning or some other place for leader development training?
Let me give you a prime example of that. Out at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, where we usually bring the Army's seed corn for its intellectual property. It is the Army's think tank out there at Leavenworth. And what we have is, because of the COVID environment, we were able to stand up the distance learning, because those people, when they came in August, never knowing that there was going to be a pandemic, had registered and signed into a distance learning capability called Blackboard that we already had. And so they were using it before for weather days, if you got a snow out or something like that. But to a man, instantly they could come back up. We didn't miss any breaks. They had their spring break, they always have. And we were able to put our digital content online and finish the CGSC class without missing a beat. We've been able to convert 73 different courses in distance learning while in flight, almost like building airplanes in flight. Our great faculty and our leaders out at all of our centers of excellence in the schools have been able to convert their learning technologies and their knowledge-based systems and put them out online and continue to train the force. That's our job: provide trained and ready forces to the Forces Command and to the other Army Service Component Commands, so that we're ready to fight and win anywhere in the world.
So a couple of questions have come in about talent management, which of course has been a buzz phrase for the Army for the past year or two, as the Army has sought to improve its management of its most precious resource, its people. And so could you talk a little bit about assessments in the talent management process? Yeah. Secondly, mentorship takes an important role, perhaps an increasingly important role in talent management as it's envisioned. And then thirdly, if we're candid with ourselves, many soldiers prefer the operating force vice the generating force. And if offered an opportunity, do you want to go to the 101st or do you want to go to Tradoc? Many officers would pick, I want to go to the 101st. How does Tradoc compete in the talent management process? So those talent management questions wrapped up.
Wow, that's a big one.
Yeah.
Well, let me just first of all say, service at Tradoc is incredibly rewarding, because you are taking the very essence of our profession. You're the first time a young man or woman gets to wear the cloth of our nation is an incredibly moving event. If you've never seen the graduation when a young man or woman comes into our Army, and that drill sergeant, they've been through 7 weeks, they go through an exercise, and it becomes a crucible for them, and then they all march in. And I saw this happen in August last year. The mist was rising up at Fort Jackson. It was pretty hot. It was August, about 6 a.m, and I hear this coming through the grass. You can hear him coming, shh, and all of a sudden, over the top of this little ridge comes 1,200 young men and women, and they march down, and they stop, and there's utter silence. And their battalion commander gets up, and he reads the soldier's creed, and those drill sergeants go down the line, and they look a kid in the eye, and they put that Army patch on their left shoulder, and they say, "Welcome to the Army, and now you're a soldier." And there's not a damn dry eye in the place. It is an incredible. So that's what service at Tradoc means. It also means taking an opportunity to reconnect with your family, understand stability, to look at how you can benefit from the absolute expertise of your business and really provide that to someone. And then if you tie that all up and you talk about, how it is mentoring wise, I think the small group instructor that I had when we did this 150 years ago was absolutely a turning point for me in my career. Being able to sit in that same room with 16 people of my same rank, share experiences and learn from one another, led by a world-class guy named Tim Hunt, who I still remember from 1980, never mind. But I still remember him and how he led our group, and we thought that guy knew every piece of doctrine ever. That's what it means to serve in Tradoc. So I am trying to make sure people understand that it's a stability, it's reconnecting with your family, it's becoming an actual professor of your business. It's about being a wartime professional, and it's about training the next generation. That's what it means to serve in Tradoc.
So let me pull on the mentorship string
Yeah.
a little bit. And what advice would you offer to a young officer, young NCO today, about what ought they be looking for in a mentor? And then to a more senior officer, a more senior non-commissioned officer or chief warrant officer, what advice would you give them about seeking out mentoring opportunities for others?
Well, the first question, I think when you're looking for a mentor, you want to find someone that's not just singularly focused on one aspect of life. There's a thing called work-life balance, and understanding work-life balance across our profession will help us along the way. So you want to find that mentor who can help you see the bigger picture of what it means to be a great family person, what it means to be give back to the profession, what it means to give back to your local communities and the people around you, what it means to be a good neighbor. And then you want somebody who will also take a personal interest in you and your family. I've had the fortunate opportunity to have multi mentors. You've had a couple of them on this show just recently. And what I learned from them was it's not just all about the Army. It's about how do you see life in the future. It's about sitting around a dinner table and having a conversation about our great profession, or maybe about the family and the trials and tribulations of raising teenagers. I mean, if somebody ever figures that out, I want to be there for that day. But at the end of the day, that's what mentoring looks for. As for the other side, we as the senior generation should hold up what it means to be part of a profession. And we should mentor young folks in terms of why it's important that they stay in, what it means to wear the cloth of your nation, what it means to lead from the front and speak truth to power, what it means to have a hard conversation about diversity or race or talent, and then being able to look someone in the eye and say, hey, you may need to take a different path. Those kinds of things are part of mentorship. I think singularly that the most important thing that happens in our great profession is the mentorship that happens between the seniors and juniors as we move through the ranks.
Yeah, and I think as you get to the most senior ranks within the Army, what you also find out is mentorship from subordinates. I've found, and I know that you have found, mentorship from senior non-commissioned officers to be quite helpful.
Yes.
As you get more senior.
Yeah.
And I also detected in your response a hint of mentorship from Dr. Beth Funk.
Exactly right. My loving wife is exactly right. We don't recognize as a nation the contributions of our family members and our spouses as well as we should, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that's fair. They carry a heavy load.
They absolutely.
Yeah. A very interesting question from the audience, and that's about generations.
Yeah.
The Army being as large as it is and being a hierarchical structure, we have many different cohorts from many different generations. And so a question of, I guess the predominance now of young officers, young soldiers are the Gen Zers.
Right.
General Muth from Recruiting Command talked about the next generation, which I guess now are some calling Gen A's.
We're going back to
the beginning. But how do those differences in generations affect how Tradoc recruits, retains, trains? I mean, it's because there is real difference.
Oh, there absolutely is. And what the good news is, those same generations that we're trying to recruit, we're bringing in on the other side too, and they recognize these young men and women because they're not that much older, but they see those talents. They understand. For example, a couple of years ago we weren't even recruiting over the internet, and now we've got folks that dominate the information space because they are They become digital natives and they speak the generation. And they've done an incredible job of keeping us connected. That's why we got Army hiring days going on, because while we're a little behind, we think the enthusiasm and the actual professional excellence that our recruiters bring to the force are going to show, and we're going to be able to be just fine at our end string.
Yeah, these are real differences. Again, another very interesting question from the audience. You talked about holistic health and fitness.
Yep.
In your response to the Army Combat Fitness Test. Important components of holistic health and fitness are the cognitive and psychological aspects of health. How's Tradoc addressing that?
Well, that's what we have occupational, in the holistic health and fitness program, you know, every unit now has the embedded health professionals. So we have the embedded health, embedded behavioral health specialists. We also are now going to have, we also have occupational specialists, and we're really trying to get after, how do you get after something like mindfulness? So we're looking at the science out there. We're doing various pilots around the training base on things like mindfulness, yoga, those kinds of mind clearing or mind I don't know, mind science kinds of things to really get after the cognitive piece of this. We're doing BCAP, as you know, the Battalion Commander's Assessment Program. That has a cognitive piece to this. We still have the ASVAB. We're continuing to push on that. At the officer level, we're taking the GRE at Captain's Career Course. So we're really getting after the cognitive space of this thing. What I want us to make sure is we continue to use work-life balance, and we continue to recognize that there are important pieces to what it means to serve that are led mostly by our great families that we got to stay connected to as well.
In that vein, you know, there's been discussion over the past several years about what some would perceive to be a growing disconnect between the Army and the nation that it serves. You know, an ever decreasing percentage of Americans serve in uniform or know someone who is serving in uniform. The percentage, as you see, percentage of young people who join the Army, either enlisting or becoming officers, a very high percentage come from families with some military background. So how do you bridge that gap? How do you make more Americans aware of not just the possibilities of service in the Army, but why it is important for them, for all Americans, to know about their Army and be supportive of their Army?
Well, part of that is engaging in the information space. It's about being part of this kind of an organization where you have this kind of dialogue. It's also about and I'm sure Frank Muth talked about it a couple of weeks ago, is the 22 Cities program, where we're getting down into the inner cities and we're talking about our great Army. But it's also about going to the county fairs, and it's about going to whatever kind of gatherings they're having and telling our story. I use a program. I ask every kid I run into that has been recognized by their chain of command for some sort of excellence thing they've done. I usually give them a coin, and then I ask them two questions. Why'd you join our Army, and why do you continue to serve? And what I get from why they joined, it's a variety of different reasons. For the benefits, to get away from something, to be part of something bigger than themselves, family business, you name it, those are there. But almost universally, on the second part of that question, why do you continue to serve? They say it's because of the people. Our greatest strength, the greatest strength of the United States Army, is its people. The Army is people. It is about people. We have great equipment, and everybody takes great care of us, but it is our people that make the difference every day. It's our leaders and their ability to motivate our young men and women to serve that matters.
It is people business, that's
Yes,
for
it
sure.
is.
At the very start, you talked about the evolving role of training and doctrine command. So to clarify for us a little bit, what's the relationship between training and doctrine command, and Army Futures Command?
Well, the relationship is Mike Murray and his great team at Army Futures Command. They look at, say, what we call the aim point force, which is 2028 and beyond. My job is to take 2020 and 2028, take the tools that we've been given, put them in the right organizations, give them the right kind of training capability, provide them to Mike Garrett and allow him to train the force, and then develop the next set of leaders through our education and leadership development programs. So I really have the force that we have now in terms of doctrine, organization, training, leader development, those kinds of things. That's my job, is to get the force ready to fight the next fight. That's what we do at Tradoc.
Big mission, no matter how you characterize.
It's a great mission.
Yep. So I think you'll be happy about this. A number of questions following up about, could you tell us more about National Hiring Days?
Absolutely.
And I'll expound upon that and say, okay, tell us what you want us to do.
Yeah, I want everybody to reach out. I want you to tell the Army story. I want you to absolutely talk about what it means to serve the nation, what it means to be part of an organization motivated to do what's right around the world, what it's right to be part of some sort of profession that really has its own norms and values, that really looks to be a merit-based organization, a values-based organization. Leaders, loyalty, duty, respect, selfless service, honor, integrity, and personal courage. Those are not just sayings, those are our values. Those are what make our Army great. And the people that implement them are what really gets excited. So I want you to tell the story. I want you to reach out to that young man or woman out there that's looking for a little direction, that has come out of college and doesn't have a job. We're hiring. We're looking for those folks that are looking for a way to make a difference in their nation. And by the way, join some pretty great people that are doing the bidding of the United States of America around the globe.
Well, we'll all try to do our part. Certainly those of us here at AUSA and our chapters across the nation and across the globe will do our part to support this as well. So the second part of your command is Doctrine.
Yes, it is.
So Doctrine sometimes gets a bad name as being confining, but talk a little bit about the Doctrine development process. How do you do that in the information age, and why do we still care about Doctrine?
Well, Doctrine becomes a set of norms and values that we can use to apply combat power around the world. And, there are multiple elements of combat power, but we have to have a common language. We have to have a common set of skills and a common vision. So when we go to tough problems, we all know where we're coming from. So Doctrine does nothing more than provide a couple of rails that allow you to implement a strategy based on the conditions that you see in front of you. Our doctrinal-based Army has been incredibly skilled at applying combat power around the globe because we have a common language. It also gives us a common set of standards to train to. That's what makes us special.
I think we've got time probably for two more questions. And so one that has come in, can you talk a little bit more about how the command is using the information environment to engage the public more broadly, for other DoD partners to include industry? How are you leveraging that capability to improve Tradoc's mission requirements? Well,
I never thought I would be on Twitter, to tell you the truth. And we are in the social media space in a big time way these days. And if you haven't, the one guy I would tell you to follow is Tanker Ted, my DCG, Ted Martin, who is an incredible inspiration on social media. But all of us are doing that because that's how this generation gets its information. It's through Instagram or Twitter or Facebook and I know that Snapchat and all that stuff. So as an old digital dinosaur like me can start talking about these things, it's remarkable. But it is the power of the nation. It's the power of ideas. And so if we're going to be part of that, information is an element of national power. So to harness it, to understand the tools necessary to get your vision of the future across, you must understand the tools necessary to do that. So that's what we're trying to do at Tradoc. We're trying to bring information into it, harness it, and use it for the common good.
So to wrap up our session, let me ask you to talk a bit about someone who I know is a hero of yours, Medal of Honor recipient, Staff Sergeant David Bellavia. You have often asked Sergeant Bellavia to accompany you on your travels and your professional development. Why? Why is it important for soldiers and for the nation to hear from Staff Sergeant David Bellavia?
Well, first of all, I came across, first of all, he's part of the Big Red One, which, as we all know, is America's 1st Division. And he is, I actually listened to him articulate his acceptance speech of the Medal of Honor from the Hall of Heroes there at the Pentagon. And his articulation of what it meant to be part of that platoon, of those folks that went into Fallujah to do our nation's bidding, to rid that part of that country of terrorists, and to hear him talk with such empathy and such courage about the men in his organization, and then to listen to him articulate what it meant to him to wear the cloth of his nation. I'll tell you, there aren't very many staff sergeants in the United States Army that have 4-star straight men, but I'll be David Bellavia's for life. I think that he understands the essence of what it means to be in our great organization. That's why I think Dave Bellavia is a great ambassador for our Army.
So thanks for that, General Funk. And I would commend all of you. If you have not heard Staff Sergeant Bellavia speak, you go on YouTube, go to some other platform. It's worth a little bit of time. And I think what David Bellavia would tell you is that it's not about him. It's about the squad.
Exactly right.
It's about his fellow soldiers, their commitment to one another, their commitment to mission, commitment to nation is very important.
He actually articulates, this is my squad. And he lays out every person from that organization. It is incredible.
So thanks, General Funk. Thanks not only for today, which has been a great session, and I can hear you all virtually applauding and thanking General Funk for being here today. I suspect there's a retired lieutenant general just outside Fort Hood, Texas, that's proud of his son today as well.
And his son is equally as proud of him.
He should be. So thanks for today. But thank you even more for a lifelong of service to our Army and to our nation. You, like every Army leader, had other options and could have made other choices. You made the hard choice, and you stayed in the United States Army. And for that, our Army is better, and thousands and thousands and thousands of soldiers and families whose lives you have touched are better for that. Thank you very, very much for that lifelong of service. For all of you, thanks for joining us today. A preview of a couple of upcoming events. The next Thought Leaders webinar here at AUSA will feature Lieutenant General Laura Richardson, Commanding General of U.S. Army North. If you don't know U.S. Army North, that is the command that has principally provided support during the COVID-19 pandemic. All those hospitals, those doctors, those medical support, all of that was organized by General Richardson and her team. And we look forward to hosting her here on July 14th with Lieutenant General Laura Richardson. Our next Thought Leaders after that will be on the 20th of July with General Paul Nakasone, Commander of United States Cyber Command and the Director of the National Security Agency. General Nakasone on 20 July. We've got a noon report on 22 July with Lieutenant General Charlie Flynn, the Army's G357, the Operations Officer for the United States Army. And lastly, to keep you appraised, on July 29th, We'll meet here with Lieutenant General Scott Dingle, the Army's Surgeon General and Commanding General of U.S. Army Medical Command. For more information or to register for any of those events, simply go to ausa.org and get more information on that. Once again, a big shout out to today's sponsor, Leonardo DRS. Thank you. It is your sponsorship that makes events like this possible. We can't thank you enough. And finally, thanks to all of you who are AUSA members. It's shocking to me, but there's probably some of you in the audience who are not yet AUSA members. You can remedy that right now. Just go to ausa.org. It's simple, it's fast. Your membership makes a difference. It allows us to continue events like this and allows us to support soldiers and their families each and every day. So please join us or renew your membership at ausa.org. General Funk, again, thanks for your leadership. Thanks for today. Thanks to all of you for joining us, and have a great Army Day.